Hi everyone, welcome to the PRCA Northwest Masterclass with Annie Goss before the budget, PA for PR practitioners. So I've known Annie a very long time. We go way back. She's, I think it's fair to say, a northern powerhouse, a media media maven. Annie's a comms professional who, for 20 years, has had experience both agency side and in-house, and she has spent the last decade as head of external relations for the University of Sheffield. And during that time, she's managed the reputation of the university, and she's dealt with many different audiences and stakeholders and had to wrestle with all sorts of issues from student protests to economic growth. So please join me in virtually welcoming Annie. Annie very much sees the alignments of comms and public affairs and believes that all comms professionals can add some public affairs activities for the benefit of and the value of their clients. Just to reiterate, however, that this session today is aimed as entry level. It's aimed at PR people who have not really had any experience with public affairs. So hopefully that was clear in the messaging, but I just wanted to reiterate that we're not going to get into sort of complex PA issues today. And with all of that said, I'm going to hand over to Annie. She's going to present. If questions come up as we go, please do pop them in the chat. And there will be 20 minutes or so after Annie's presentation to have the opportunity to ask them. So if we can run that presentation first, that would be appreciated. I am recording today. Hopefully that's okay with everybody. It's going to be put on PRCA TV, which is our YouTube channel, and I will be circulating the slides and the YouTube link following. So if you could just bear with me while I quickly set up the tech, I will very shortly hand over to Annie. If I actually, I shouldn't spotlight you, should I? I should not spotlight you because I'm running the slides. While I do spotlight you, Annie, would you like to say anything else in addition to my little intro to you?
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Sophie, and thank you to everyone who's joining us today. Just as Sophie loads up the presentation, just to say, I hope that there's some kind of interesting tips here for people who are PR practitioners but want to learn a little bit more about what public affairs is and how you might be able to integrate it into some of your activity. And as Sophie mentioned, we will have an opportunity at the end for a few questions, and I would be very happy if people have more questions or think of them afterwards to connect with people as well.
Can everybody see the presentation as the main thing, or have you still got Annie? If someone could give me
I can see the presentation.
Excellent. Okay. Well, if there's any issues, just please drop a note in the chat. And otherwise, Annie, I'll drive the presentation and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, Sophie. So we'll move to the first slide then, which is just a bit of an overview of what public affairs is. So this was, I think, a really good definition from Connect, which is an organization that does a lot of policy and public affairs. So public affairs is a term used to describe an organization's approach to building and maintaining relationships with key stakeholders, particularly those in the political or governmental sphere. It gives form and function to the essential networking that leaders must participate in, from meetings with local MPs and community leaders to discussions with Whitehall officials, sector leaders, the media, think tanks, and policy influencers. So it's quite a broad definition, but hopefully that gives you some understanding of public affairs and, you know, how it aligns a little bit more with public relations, which I will talk about a little bit more. So what that means in terms of public affairs activities, it translates into government relations, talking to government ministers, departments, stakeholder relations, so looking at kind of sector leaders and the relationships with them, lobbying, advocacy and campaigning, so trying to get changes, trying to kind of advocate for your organizations, the people that you support, and trying to campaign for change. parliamentary monitoring, so understanding what's happening in Parliament, what's happening with policies, how they affect you. Issues and risk management. A lot of you will do that, a lot of that from a public relations perspective, but the monitoring political and other issues that could really affect an organisation, and then also crisis management with a political dimension. So a little bit about how public affairs can help PR and help your organizations and your clients. So what you're able to do with public affairs is you're able to influence what might be local, national policies and or regulation. So most of you will be supporting organizations who actually have, are working in a sector which will have possibly some regulation, but certainly have some policies and issues that affect it. And so this is a real opportunity to kind of influence some of that. It can also enhance reputation and credibility. I think if you are liaising with MPs, with ministers, if you're able to kind of invite ministers to come and visit your organisation, it kind of can show a bit of credibility, the same way that getting a really, really good article in a national newspaper can. Public affairs activity can help access opportunities for funding. There's lots of opportunities for funding that the government delivers. Public affairs can help bridge that really and bring that together and access those opportunities. It can forge partnerships because a lot of this is about relationships, and it can horizon scan. So looking at those future opportunities, looking at those risks, looking at what might be affecting your organizations down the road. Thanks, Sophie. So just as you would be looking at your objectives, strategy and tactics for your public relations activity, public affairs is very similar. So how you can integrate public affairs activity into your PR strategies is really to do that work, to explore with your leaders, with your organizations, what are the objectives? Why do you want to do this? Look at what the potential is for strategy, and then start outlining some of the tactics that you might want to use. Very similar to how you work with the media. You need to look at your company and clients' priorities, look at the government's priorities and your stakeholders' priorities, and then look at how you can align your activity. So the same way in which you spend a lot of time looking at what journalists are writing about, what's happening in the media, what's the top of the agenda, do the same thing with those government stakeholders and really look at how you can align that activity together. Thanks. So a couple of early actions that you might be able to take. So encouraging your spokespeople to comment on policies that affect their organizations. So I am going to talk a little bit about the budget that's coming up and some of the things that are coming up. But, in the meantime, there's likely to be all kinds of different issues that affect your organization. And sometimes I think people are hesitant to comment on political activity. It can be really, really useful for an organization to say what they think, make that comment publicly, make it on your social media channels, put it on your website, and then also let your local representatives know as well. So do contact your local MPs. So depending on where your organization is based or your clients are based, you will have a local MP. You can contact them. You can find their details from a website called theyworkforyou.com. And you can contact your local MPs, let them know what you're working on, let them know what your priorities are, let them know what changes you would like to see. Invite them along to come and see your organization, come and meet with your organization. I'd say with local MPs, a top tip is they tend to be in Westminster between Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if you can invite them on Mondays and Fridays, they're much more likely to be within their constituency. And that's a really, really good time to invite them along, to actually have that FaceTime with them. Similarly with your metro mayors, as a lot of you will know, devolution has meant that there's a lot more opportunities now. So do contact them, let them know what you're working on, let them know what your priorities are, let them know how they might be able to help. So both MPs and Metro mayors want to take your issues, want to take them forward. So contact them, write them letters, invite them for a meeting. I'd say, really do kind of start bridging that gap and doing that for your clients, because it can be a real opportunity. Similarly, you can engage with relevant ministers and shadow ministers. So depending on what your sector is or your client sector, you'll be looking at all kinds of different ministers that may have some of that within their responsibility. So you can engage with them, invite them along to things. They want to hear from small businesses. They want to hear what's happening at the moment. They want to hear how they can help. We are still under a year into a new parliament. Might not feel like it, but we are. And so there's lots of opportunities to still influence, to still kind of make those connections right now with new ministers, new junior ministers as well, and also shadow ministers. So the opposition parties are really trying to reform after last year's election, and they're trying to kind of have this opportunity to work out what their kind of new strategy, new policies are. So they also want to hear from people. They want to hear from businesses. So depending on what the kind of political landscape is in where you're based or where your clients are based, do look at those shadow ministers as well as the relevant ministers. And then also to seek out relevant APPGs and select committees. And I will talk just a little bit more about that, because I do think that gives real good early opportunities as well. So APPGs, they stand for All Party Parliamentary Groups, and they're groups of MPs and Lords across the political sphere. So, and they meet to discuss specific areas of focus. Now, there's usually over 500 APPGs registered. They change all the time, and they can be for any issue, really. Now, what you can do, if you have a look through the list that's on parliament.uk of all the APPGs, you'll find that they usually have a secretariat. They've usually got an organisation, an external organisation who's helping to coordinate them. So, for example, I don't know, the APPG on social care has a social care organisation coordinating for it. If you look down the list and you find that there isn't an APPG about the sector that your organisation works in or that your client works in, but you think there's a real opportunity to influence, then actually you can look to set up an APPG yourselves. It can take a lot of work, and it's a lot of coordination, because you're having to invite people, you're having to organise events, you're having to, you're having to do an awful lot to coordinate a lot of parliamentarians from across the political divide. However, if influencing change is a key priority for your organisation, it might be worth exploring. If you do find that there's an APPG that represents your sector, your issues, then do contact them. Do contact the so within the APPG list, there's contact details. You can contact them. You can find out a little bit more about what they do. Most of the events that they run, and I've got a picture of one there of a very crowded event in Parliament. Most of the events that they run are open to the public, are open to relevant organisations. And so you can join in. They often want people to come along, give some examples, give some information about their sector, what they're doing, and get lots of questions from various kind of parliamentarians who may or may not have sector knowledge as well. So it is useful. So I would say do have a look at APPGs. That would be a first good step to do when you're thinking about talking to your clients, talking to your organisations about public affairs. Select committees. Now, select committees are a bit different to APPGs in that they have a little bit more of a formal responsibility in Parliament. So the work that select committees do is more likely to directly influence policy. They're small. They tend to be quite small. APPGs can be all kinds of different sizes, but Select committees tend to be quite small. They are cross-party again, so they tend to have representatives from all the major parties on them, including members of the Lords as well. And they are set up to investigate an issue, a specific issue. And their findings do tend to have some influence. They usually call for both written and oral evidence. If your client, if your leaders are invited to come along and to give oral evidence at a select committee, I would say this is a great opportunity. Can be quite nerve-wracking. There will need to be quite a lot of preparation in the same way that you would prepare your leaders for a media interview. It's useful to do very similar prep because you can get some quite difficult questions at select committees, but it's very useful to be able to build those links to actually influence directly. However, if you're not invited to come along and give oral evidence at a select committee, you can still give written evidence. And these can usually be submitted either by an individual, a leader, or perhaps by yourselves, or by an organisation. The evidence will often be published. And if it isn't, then once you've submitted it, you can publish it yourselves as well. Share it on your social media channels, share it on your websites, show people how you are contributing to changing a particular issue. I'll give an example at the moment. There is a select committee looking at the future of working from home. So you'll have seen this to be a huge debate in the media at the moment. Should people be working from home? Should they be encouraged or even forced to return to the office? Should there be a balance? And there's a lot of debate about that. So a select committee has been set up. And at the moment, it is asking for evidence. So it's asking for either organizations or individuals to write in and say what they think and why they think a particular way. And should there be any policy that legislates for this? So should there be a policy that legislates that everyone should be in an office 3 days a week? Or actually, is that really restrictive? And actually, this shouldn't be an area that should be any policy on. And this is your opportunity to contribute. But as I say, there's lots of different select committees, lots of different calls for evidence taking place at any one time as well. So if you look again at parliament.uk and under committees, you'll see all the select committees that are calling for evidence at the moment. And you can have a look through, see if there's anything relevant for your organisation. And also you can have a look through and see whether there's opportunities for you to ask whether or not you could give oral evidence as well. So before the budget, what is coming up? So the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, committed last year that she would only have one main fiscal event every year. So that means that the budget that took place in October last year, in autumn last year, was the main budget. So good news is that we're not expecting any new large tax rises, changes to be coming up anytime soon. However, there is going to be something called the Spring Forecast and the Spring Statement on the 26th of March, a couple of weeks' time. So the Spring Forecast will be shared by the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, and they will share what the economy is looking like, and that will be shared by the Chancellor. And then the Chancellor will then respond to that with a statement. So at the moment, we're not looking at any huge changes, but we are probably looking at a couple, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, as well as the Spring Forecast and the Spring Statement. At the moment, there's also a comprehensive spending review, a CSR, taking place. This is essentially going to set out kind of multi-years spending priorities for the government. So they're going to be looking right until the next election about which government departments get which funding. Now, lots of organisations have sent into the Treasury their thoughts about the CSR and where money should be. So there's going to be likely, although this can always change, likely going to be some kind of statement in June this year about what the comprehensive spending review is looking like. So who is going to get what money? So which government departments are likely to see cuts and which government departments are likely to see boosts until the next parliament. So what to expect? As I mentioned, we're not expecting any big tax announcements on the 26th. I think the announcements, especially around NI last year, have sent some shocks through lots of organisations. And I think the government's being really quite careful at the moment not to make any other really kind of big changes. So we shouldn't be expecting that. However, what we're seeing ahead of the 26th is we're already seeing a few things being touted around in the media or actually announced around cuts, around spending priorities. So we should be expecting before the 26th and beyond that both defence and health spending will be protected. However, there's going to be cuts elsewhere. So we've already seen that international development has been cut quite significantly in order to pay for defence. And then we have also seen, and it's likely we're going to have a statement on this tomorrow, we've seen that welfare and benefit spending is going to be cut as well. What else is going to be cut and by how much, we don't know yet. It might be that comes before the 26th. It probably will come later. It'll probably be more likely to be announced around that kind of June time. So we'll have to kind of keep a close eye on that. And then a little bit about opportunities as well. So if any of these policies are going to affect your organization, your client, do comment on them. So, take the time to write to your local MPs from your leaders, comment on what changes affect them, why, what would they like to see from the government, what policies would make a real change to them, why would it work, why does it make sense now, what evidence can you give them, what case studies can you give them, what spokespeople can you give them in order to be able to help them make that case for you as well. And then align your messages to the government missions. So I've set out those kind of 6 missions here on this slide, which are strong foundations. A lot of that is about defence. It's also about immigration, kickstarting economic growth, an NHS fit for the future, safer streets. So a lot of that is around behaviour, and breaking down barriers to opportunity. So that a lot of that is, about those kind of opportunities, education, and then making Britain a clean energy superpower. So a lot of that innovation in that clean energy space, in that net zero space as well. So those are the 6 current government missions. If when you're communicating with parliamentarians, with MPs, if you can align your messages to those 6 missions, that really helps them and it helps you. So it means that your MPs can really make that case. They can really kind of talk to ministers. They can make that case of why your messages are important because you've aligned them to those government missions. And I would say in particular, growth. So the government at the moment, they've had a rocky start. There is no doubt about it. So they're really looking for any opportunities of where organizations can support growth. So if your leaders, if your organizations have really good ideas, actually, we could really support economic growth if we did this, if we had more opportunities here, then actually now's the time to be saying it. Because, they're really crying out, ministers, we're hearing this, they want to come and visit, and they want to have these case studies. They want to show how they're supporting economic growth. They want the ideas as well of how economic growth can really kind of happen, especially in the regions, because actually they've announced a growth corridor in Oxford, Cambridge. They're looking at where they can kind of get that low-hanging fruit, where actually growth's already happening and they can make it happen a little bit more, turbocharge it. However, they do need those opportunities elsewhere. They need those examples. So actually now is the time to be really, really sharing how your organizations, how your clients can support economic growth. And you can be quite creative with that as well. Even if it doesn't seem obvious, there'll be a way where you can actually look at your messages, look at those government missions and align them together. And just finally, so if this is something you want to look at a little bit more, if with your organizations you want to think, right, you know what, we want to be adding this string to our bow, we want to be offering this to our clients, I'd say a really good first step would be looking at monitoring. So when I worked in an agency, we didn't do mainly PR, but actually what we looked at was parliamentary monitoring. So we had de Havilland, which I would say is my favorite of the monitoring and the contact databases. And we shared with clients what was happening in Parliament, what bills were going through, what select committee conversations there were. And that was a really good way of actually adding that and making sure that our clients felt informed, making sure that they had some of that information to their fingertips. So they are relatively costly. I'd say about £6,000 a year for some of these. Now we're seeing more and more that some of the databases that are PR databases, such as Vulio, are offering now political contacts and political monitoring as an add-on. So that's always an opportunity as well. But that's something for you to consider if you wanted to look at this and start to add that kind of extra string to your bow. And please do stay in touch. So if you'd like a bit more of a conversation about this, then do contact me via LinkedIn. My LinkedIn address is there. And, we can talk a little bit more about how your organization can integrate a little bit more public affairs activity into your PR plans. Okay, I'll hand over to Sophie for the questions.
First of all, thank you, Annie. That was absolutely brilliant. I learned loads. I had no idea, for example, that you could actually respond to a select committee. I thought they were just for kind of grilling people when things went wrong, but that's a really brilliant piece of insight, and obviously a massive opportunity here, and particularly in the regions as well. Funnily enough, I was at the convention on the North a couple of weeks ago, and all of the metro mayors outlined their strategies, and funnily enough, I did actually use one of them for one of my clients, but it's reassuring to know that I was along the right pathway with that. Just one thing to say before we get into the questions, and please do add your questions into the chat. Did you want to say, Annie, anything about you being currently available for helping or training or anything like that? I know you've
sure. Yeah. So I have
for you.
Yeah, so I have left my role at the University of Sheffield. As Sophie mentioned, I was there for 10 years, managing both communications and public affairs for the University of Sheffield. So absolutely do contact me if there are opportunities or if there's any kind of freelance opportunities. Very keen to have a conversation. Thanks, Sophie.
It's a pleasure. So I've got a couple of questions just while we're waiting for questions to come in from the audience. Just on the monitoring, obviously £6,000 might be a bit expensive for people like me who are pretty much, me and freelancers. Is there any equivalent to kind of #journo request, which is the kind of poor man's media database, to go out and kind of actively, is there anything like that exists? Is that just a question of keeping your eyes on the parliamentary websites or following certain MPs?
Yeah, so absolutely you can. So everything that happens in Parliament actually is on the kind of parliament.uk website. So you can spend the time doing your own monitoring, to be fair. So you can spend the time looking what's coming up, what's happening, who's involved, all the ministers, all the departments, they're all listed as well on the government website. So you can certainly do your own research. The reason why some of these paid for monitoring sites are really helpful is that you can use your keywords, you can tell them what it is that you're particularly interested in, and they can really kind of streamline that for you and give you those kind of relevant events, the relevant kind of parts of kind of parliamentary discussions, etc., to kind of save you time. I would say for freelancers, I mean, I don't know whether this is something that's offered by Dodds or de Havilland, but it may be worth looking at, whether or not they have a freelance offer, or whether you can join together with other people. If they don't, I think it's something they should look at at the moment. But I mean, you certainly can find a lot of what's happening, again, just by looking on the Parliament website or by looking at social media, actually. And, the same way that you're talking about hashtag journo request, there isn't quite the equivalent that I'm aware of, but you can look, I mean, still on X, but also Blue Sky more and more now. And LinkedIn, of course, more and more, and find out what's happening in your particular area as well.
Okay, brilliant. So no questions yet in the chat, but it would be really fabulous to have some comments, thoughts, feedback, questions, anything, just so that me and Annie don't feel like we're broadcasting into a desert. I'll ask a couple more questions while that's happening. You mentioned in the beginning, Annie, like issues and risk management in the same way that you could be proactive in preparing for a potential crisis in PR as you would do with clients. Could you bring that to life a little bit for me? And could you perhaps paint a picture or give us an example of something that you could prepare for in a political issues risk management kind of a way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, what you can find is that actually we found this certainly in the last 10 years, but really in the last 5 years, things might change a little bit with this Parliament. But we found that, issues were really playing out politically on social media, on X, formerly Twitter in particular, that people were kind of mentioning different things, that you would find that parliamentarians, particularly ministers, would jump on a particular issue. This can be really damaging for an organization, actually. Once politicians have picked up on a certain issue and they are taking it upon themselves to comment on it, it can be really damaging. And it can kind of add a certain level to your crisis or your issues that you're trying to manage that can make things much, much harder and can actually lead to some real damage. So, you might get policies made on the hoof to respond to a particular issue. That's why I would say it's really important, if you are making change or if you have any other issues that you're dealing with, and it's a media issue, it's a stakeholder issue, that you let your local MPs or the relevant ministers know, depending on the level. So if you're making some changes to your organizations, it's really useful to contact your local MP and say, look, we're making these changes. These are the reasons why we're making these changes. We're expecting to have some response to this, some negative response to this. This is why. It may be that your constituents write to you about the changes we're making. This is, we're happy to speak to you. And I really get on the front foot, the same way that you would with those stakeholders. Get on the front foot with your with your political stakeholders. Let them know what's going to be happening. Let them know your response. And if you are deep in a crisis, deep in an issue, again, engage them. Let them know what's happening. They'll have heard about it if it's a big meaty crisis. And it's useful to get them on board as quickly as possible, because otherwise they can add another level of issue for you and for your organization.
Brilliant. That's so helpful. Thank you. We've had a good question come through. Thanks for the comments, Kerry and Nicole. Tom from Democracy. It can sometimes be hard to get prospective clients to buy into PR because impact can be a slow burner. How would you suggest the best way to get buy-in or investment into a public affairs service for those that haven't done it before?
It's a really, really good question. So I'm assuming what you mean, Tom, is that you've kind of got clients, you've got them to buy into PR. Impact can be a slow burner, but you want them to also buy into a public affairs offer as well. So I think, with that, I think being able to show them the reasons why. So I think if you can look at kind of the policies, the issues that are affecting your client, where you might be able to influence, where you might be able to add profile, where it might be able to help a funding bid. Because I think in particular, MPs, they can do all kinds of different things. So as well as influencing national policy, they can also kind of speak regionally. They can give you a bit of a platform. They can give you an opportunity to make links. They can make links for you. They do have kind of a very wide sphere of what they're able to get involved in and the issues that they're able to take up. So I think being able to show why it might be important and why it would be worth that additional investment for a client to actually be able to invest in some public affairs activity. I think if you were able to give them something tangible, so, we would like to invite this minister to come along and meet you because, then I do think that probably helps in terms of their internal discussions about why they might want to get involved in that, why that might be really useful for them, why that might actually help their publicity, their credibility, to be able to put on their social media channels, we had this minister come and visit us. This is why, this is what they said about us, and so I think if you can give them tangible examples of what they might be able to do and why, then I think that's really helpful.
I think just on that, I used to sell in public affairs services when I was at a big agency in London that primarily did PR, but also did PA. And I think, sorry if this sounds shallow, and Annie, you're probably more of an expert in this, but one of the things we used to say to clients was, once people have achieved a certain amount in business, once somebody's been very successful and become perhaps a local employer and employed lots of people, the natural next step is to enter public life. And public affairs is a really good way of creating that new form of influence, at a higher level for the greater good. Look at people like Alan Sugar and Tanni Gray-Thompson, for example, who've really made great strides in actually affecting real world change. And I think, something I used to say to people as well was, there are two ways to really create change in this world, and it's through the media, getting on the radar of the media, capturing the world's attention that way, or through politics. And hand in glove, which is where you pull the two things together, is a really, really powerful way of affecting change. And just a brief example, if I may, from we had last week, Michael Duran, who's the head of comms for the Liverpool City Council. He was talking about how they turned around the very negative press on the right-wing riots that happened in response to the Southport stabbings, and how that immediately sort of shone a spotlight on an area, particularly a very deprived area of Liverpool, but how ultimately, because they rescued the narrative through focusing on recovery, rebuilding and renewal, that now they have engagement with government on all sorts of things that they didn't have before in this kind of ignored, deprived part of Liverpool, because a kind of happy consequence of that was the spotlight was sort of shined, and it's opened up opportunities for funding and other things. So that's just maybe a little anecdote there that might be helpful. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Annie.
Well, I think that's a really, really good anecdote, because absolutely sometimes politicians have absolutely no idea what's going on in lots of organizations, in lots of places. And once you give them that information, they want to get more involved. So I think that's a really, really good example of actually what they're able to do there is highlight some issues where there could be change, and ask the politicians, the people who are looking at this, what they might be able to do to really help. And I think that's a really important example, because I think, there will be so much that your organizations, that your sectors do, which, your peers know about, others, within your world know about, but politicians really don't. And actually, once they do, they might be able to grab those issues, talk about them, link them to some kind of policies, to what's coming up, and also kind of affect change in that way. I would also just say as well that, when you start getting involved in public affairs activity, when your organizations or your clients do, sometimes what happens is other organizations within that sector really start looking up to them. So, what you'll find, for example, I'll give the example, I don't know, I'll give me an example, Sophie, of an organization, and I'll kind of talk about it in that way.
What, just any example of
Any
any?
organisation.
Oh God.
Okay, I'll do it. A manufacturing. So there's a manufacturing organization. So say there's a kind of manufacturing organization in the Northwest, and it starts making noises, starts inviting ministers, starts talking, starts commenting on what changes could really help the manufacturing sector. What you will find is that other manufacturing organizations within the Northwest start going, oh, that's a really good point. That's a really, really good point to make. Thank you for making that. Can we help? And so, it really naturally forges those partnerships because actually, and you can really position yourself as a leader and your organization as a leader by being the ones who put their heads above the parapet, make the comments, invite the ministers, say, share the thought leadership. And it can really be quite an important and powerful positioning piece as well. And I think that's a really important point to make when you're talking about the reasons why and actually how you can talk to your clients about this and why it's important.
Funnily enough, actually, something did spring to mind. There is a membership organisation. It's a national membership organisation, but they've got a particularly powerful branch in Merseyside where I'm based, and they distinguish themselves by doing that piece of engaging with government, and because of that, they charge extortionate fees. But everybody sees that as the kind of holy grail to kind of look up to. I mean, and also just on a totally regular note, engaging with MPs is really helpful, especially if you run a business, and most especially if you run a small business. I have had numerous problems in the past, such as with HMRC. I've spoken to the MP's office. They have a duty to get back to you, follow up, make sure that you're happy, and they've resolved problems for me straight away. So it's a great port of call anyway to be visible, I would say, with your local MP. Just finally, maybe I've got one more question. If there's any more questions, if there's no more, we'll wrap up after this. But the select committee thing was very interesting to me, and I thought that it might be helpful again to perhaps just get maybe an example of that, Annie, from your past experience, or can anyone just get on one of these things? Why should we
you mean to be able to give oral evidence or written evidence? So I mean,
yeah, and how much time does it? Is it like a sort of jury service thing where you could be in there being grilled for 3 weeks and it takes you away from the day to day? I mean, what's the reality of it?
Hopefully not. So it tends to be. So it depends on the issue, and it depends kind of where on the kind of political priority list and the agenda the issue is. So if it's kind of a large contentious issue, then when you're called to give evidence, and things might be a little bit different there. But on the whole, it will be actually, you want to go along, you want to give evidence, you want to talk about this. So you can contact the people running the select committee. You can talk to your local MPs and say, look, can you get involved in this? Can you help me get involved in this? We want to. Or you can submit the written evidence and then say you would be happy to give oral evidence as well. It shouldn't take too much time. It should just be, one session being able to talk about it. These are kind of crossbench, lots of different MPs and likely lords as well who want to hear, they want to find out, they want to understand, because they're going to be making some recommendations here about policy changes, what can change. So I would say taking the time to write a response can be really helpful, actually, to give written evidence, because not only does it influence change, and you can then share it on your websites, on your social media channels, but it might also help with some of that PR messaging, because you're actually really kind of drilling down why you want change. What are the priorities? What are the case studies? What are the examples from your organization? So it could actually really kind of help set a bit of a blueprint for lots of different messages beyond also influencing the change as well. So it could be a really helpful exercise to do for your organization, I would say.
Brilliant. I think we've got one from Nicole. Could you suggest resources, books, courses, or other for learning more about PA and upskilling in this area? I can come back with some. We do have a PA diploma, Nicole. I will, if you want to message me your email address, I can send you some PRCA training courses on this. I don't know if you've got any other.
Yes, I wanted to make sure you'd mention some PRCA training courses, because I know that there will be some, and I think there will be some really helpful ones that you can access as well. I will share one that I've always found really helpful, which is Parley training. So Parley training, they do all kinds of different courses. One that I think is really helpful, and I've known lots of people benefit from, they do one which is public affairs for press officers. So it's really targeted at people who are press officers, who are working in those kind of public relations practitioner posts, but they want to learn a little bit more about public affairs. They want to think about how they can add it a little bit more to their practice. They want to consider those political audiences when they're doing their press officer, their PR activity as well. So I would say Parley training has always been a really good provider.
Excellent. Well, if there's no more questions, a big thank you to Annie. That was really inspiring. Great to see you as well, and good luck with whatever's next. Everybody on the group, obviously this is a PRCA Northwest online masterclass, but it's open to everyone because it's kind of borderless. But obviously we're flying the flag for the Northwest region. We've got a burgeoning community here. Let me know if you want to get involved with anything. We've got another session, which is going to be fascinating, on Thursday the 20th with Ashanti Bental-Dew, who is the founder of the Competency Centre for Workplace Equity. And she's going to be talking all about diversity and equity, particularly in a time of Trump, which I think is going to be quite fascinating. So hope to see you guys there. I've sent the link at the top for the PRCA Northwest LinkedIn group. Please do follow and like and comment and share. It really, really helps us to spread the message about what we're doing. And any feedback or in any way that we can serve you, the members, and give you more value, please just give me a shout. That's what we're here for. So thanks once again, Annie, and looking forward to seeing you all at another PRCA Northwest event soon.